Hello, in this presentation I'd like to talk about how we define abnormal. Society today is made out of a ton of different people. Everyone's unique and have their differences. When does these differences become problematic? When do we start defining these differences as a disorder? In this presentation, I'd like to talk about how we come up with the rules of defining a disorders. So, what makes something a disorder? Is it being maladaptive? Is it causing problems with people in our society? Is it causing harm to oneself? Is it something that will cause you distress in your daily life? Or do we just have an expert, and the expert will tell us what's abnormal and what's not? To take a look at this, I'm going to use the DSM. So why am I using the DSM to see how we define something as disorder? Well, the DSM stands for Diagnostic Statistic Manual. The DSM is used for diagnosing patients with disorders. This is used by psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists alike. Therefore, I think it'd be very useful to deconstruct it to see how we define disorders in the society we live in. The DSM-5 is what I'm going to be referencing. It is the most current up-to-date DSM out there. It defines abnormal behavior as something that violates norms of society, maladaptive, is rare given the context and culture of the environment, and something that causes distress in a person's daily life. Now in the next slides, let's examine this and see if it holds true. Our first disorder we'll be looking at is schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, I feel, is the most famous disorder out there. When you talk about disorders, a lot of people think of schizophrenia. I'm going to sum out how the DSM-5 defines schizophrenia, because if not, it will take up the whole slide. Schizophrenia affects how a person feels, thinks, and acts. When someone has this disease, they have a difficulty distinguishing between what is real and imaginary. People having schizophrenia have difficulty expressing normal emotions in social settings. If we look back on how the DSM-5 defines abnormal behavior, I think this is a good example of it. Schizophrenia is maladaptive. Person who experiencing this disorder will violate the norms of society where they're at. This disorder is causing the person distress in their daily lives. So far, so good with the first disorder of being true what the DSM defines as abnormal. The next disorder we'll be looking at is anti-personality disorder. A lot of people think this disorder means you want to stay at home and not interact with anyone else in society. This, however, is untrue. How the DSM-5 characterizes someone with this disorder is disregarding rights of others. These individuals usually have a history of crime. If you look at prisons today, it'll be filled with people with antisocial personality disorders. It is also doesn't mean that you're very smooth and can get away with anything. It just means you lack remorse or guilt for all the acts you've committed. A lot of people with this do not feel like they're doing anything wrong, and they're able to justify their action behavior. As this is a common trait of serial killers. One serial killer in particular, Edmund Kemper, would blame all his killings on his mother. His mother drove him crazy, and to do all these horrible acts. This is a key trait of antisocial personality disorder. If we look back to what a DSM-5 again defines abnormal behavior, we'll see it is in agreement with it. It violates the norms of society, and hopefully it's rare. So far, so good. With these two disorders, the DSM-5 is staying true to what it defines abnormal behavior is. However, it's gonna start deviating from that in these next disorders. This is where I'm putting my claim that instead of these rules, what really defines abnormal behavior is that we have an expert who researches behavior and judges what is abnormal, what is not. Eating disorders. An eating disorders involves a person's refusal to eat foods or a certain food group for at least a month. Keyword in this would be a failure to thrive. This is when people are not getting enough weight to grow, to develop. Eating disorders come in many shapes and sizes. It's not always not eating food. One case was someone did not want to eat fiber, so they didn't have to defecate. Another is sometimes people would feel like they're not in control of their lives. Not eating suddenly puts back the feeling of control in their lives. Now, if we notice, looking back, and people's refusal to eat a certain food group, this puts people on diet into the eating disorders, like vegetarians, vegans, people on the Atkins diet. And when you hear these people on this diet, maybe you don't like it or not, but you don't think they have a disorder. So, this is where you need an expert to come in, look at you, and decide whether your preference not eating a certain food is causing you harm or not. Another fairly famous disorder I feel is OCD. This is because a lot of people think they have it, especially if they read the DSM. OCD stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder and is characterized by intrusive thoughts that produce anxiety and repetitious behaviors or rituals. It has two main definitions: obsessions and compulsions. Obsessions is unwanted and unintentional thoughts, and compulsions is the urge, usually dealing with these thoughts, and that's where you get the rituals from. Another common thing is for OCD people to wash their hands or wash things repetitively. Some cases in OCD including people thinking, hey, I need to tap the heel of my shoe against the forehead. This thought is obsession. The compulsion is doing it. Just like some people would have thoughts, hey, every time I go into a room, I need to turn on and off the light switch 5 times, or someone that I love will die. That would be the unwanted and unintentional thoughts. The compulsion is when they actually do this. If you take a look at me and my work setting, it looks like I have OCD. I wash my hands a lot, especially when you look at me entering and exiting a certain room. However, I'm a chemist. Washing my hands, I feel, is a very important thing to do, so I do not spread or get the chemicals on myself. I also clean up my work area fairly often. Unfortunately, my lab mates are very messy and they don't clean up their mess. And a lot of times when we screw up on a test, it's because some other sample of some other test gets into our sample and ruins the results. So, my ritual of always cleaning is a very good one, and I don't think that qualifies for me having OCD. Let's go further in the topic of OCD by looking how someone is diagnosed with this disorder. When someone has an obsession, the obsession must be outside normal range of worries. And the compulsion must be seen by the individual as irrational, but they still must have to perform the compulsion. All this impairs some aspect of an individual's social daily life. So, outside the normal range of worries. Problem is we would worry that a wolf would kill us over a vending machine. However, vending machines kill more people than wolves do each year. And we would fear a wolf over driving. But driving kills a lot more people than wolves do. Yet none of this is seen as irrational. So, how are we to judge what's outside the normal range of worry? We couldn't have this as a yes or no function. We need someone to weigh in. And there's things that are impairing our daily lives, like making the bed. Some people would say that's impairing our daily lives of time ill spent. But that doesn't make us OCD. So another problem is how much is this task taking up our life, and how much is it worth our investment? Another example is when I was little, I thought, don't step on the crack, you fall, break your back, or you will break your mother's back. I heard people saying this several times, so I stopped stepping on cracks because I didn't want to break my back or my mother's back. Luckily for me, someone saw me performing this weird ritual and asked what I was doing. I told them, and they told me it was just a rhyme. However, a year after this, I still perform it. Now, did I have OCD before the person mentioned that this was irrational to do? And did I have OCD the year after? It didn't really affect my daily life. I slowly got off of the compulsion, but still, would I have OCD in this case, or would I be just another normal little kid playing around? Now to the disorder I feel shows the problem we have today of diagnosing someone with a disorder. And forgive me if I slaughter this, hypochondriasis. It's a mental disorder characterized by the excessive fear or preoccupation with having a seriously illness despite medical results and reassurances. So what is the issue with hypochondriasis? Surely you must have seen someone with this disorder or similar disorder on TV, or you know someone with this in your daily personal life. The problem comes from the illness. A person could have a poorly understood, unknown, or misdiagnosed illness and be mistaken having hypochondriasis. Only fix for this is if we had a complete understanding of the human body. I don't think we can ever get to this point. So, if someone says they have an illness or not feeling normal, and we've never seen this illness before, they could have been mistaken for someone with hypochondriasis. I myself had a disease that was diagnosed several times, and I could have fit under this category. And many times I would go to a doctor, they'll just see that I have back pains and just thought I had a crappy back. However, they were wrong, and this is the problem with diagnosing today, is there's a lot of stuff we don't understand, and we can misdiagnose things like hypochondriasis. Finally, let's look at the history of the DSM. As you can tell, there's been 5 versions, with version 1 was made from World War II because soldiers were coming home with a lot of mental disorders. So, the DSM-1 was made to try to categorize and treat these returning soldiers. The DSM-1 was made 130 pages long and listed 106 mental disorders. Many of these disorders has since been abandoned. And why? Did we better understand the human mind? How can something be true yesterday not be true today? And do we have more to understand about the human mind? So, to finalize my thoughts, looking back at all the disorders we look through, when we define these abnormalities, we do try to get something as violating the norm of society. Maladaptive is rare given the context of culture and environment, and causing distress in people's daily lives. However, that is not the case. We still need experts there to judge whether or not our behavior is abnormal. I hope you continue thinking about this, and I hope it helps dispel the stigma people have when they have a disorder. Thank you for listening. This was my presentation.